Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro and this is what's coming up on the show today. We'll be taking a look at different funding models across the world for public broadcasters. This as the SABC released its latest financial results for the financial year ended March 2020, and it doesn't look great, unfortunately. And in our Back in History feature, we go back to the year 2004, the 25th of November actually, and you might remember Schabir Shasik was on trial for corruption. That's coming up a little bit later on. Don't forget, you can engage with us on social media using our Twitter handle, hashtag SABC Media Monitor. And also share your views with us on WhatsApp. And the number to dial is 065 862 4548. That's 065 862 4548. Okay, before we get into those highlighted stories on the program, let's first take a look at what's on the front pages of our Sunday newspapers this morning. And we start with the Sunday Times and free flights jackpot for pensioners mentioned there. And the Sunday Times, this is about how former ministers and their ex-spouses, including apartheid-era politicians, are flying around the country at a cost of millions of rands to the taxpayers, despite this benefit being removed from the ministerial handbook last year. The City Press, well, the front page headline there reads, Ace State Witness Bombshell. And the paper's reporting that the former Premier of the Free State, Ace Magashule's personal assistant, did not agree to testify for the state against the corruption accused. This is despite contrary claims by the Police Priority Crimes Unit, the Hawks. The paper says that the case of money laundering and fraud against the ANC Secretary General could be on rocky ground, as the former personal assistant is seen as a key witness. The Sunday Independent's front page story tells of the fugitive couple, the Bushiris' escape from South Africa. Now, according to the paper, Shepherd Bushiri and his wife Mary were issued with diplomatic passports bearing decoy names. The couple apparently was disguised with some cosmetic facial changes before being smuggled out of the country in the Malawian President Lazarus Chakwera's jet. All of this reportedly with the help of South African officials. The Sunday Tribune is leading with a story about the eThekwini municipality's city manager, Sipho Nzunza, who's been rearrested apparently after he violated his bail conditions. The City Council is to decide what to do, as Nzunza's new bail conditions are much stricter than before, and that makes it very difficult for him to work. He's asked for special leave from council, a request the municipality's top brass has made a decision on. Nzuza is facing fraud and corruption charges alongside former Mayor Zandile Gumede. The Weekend Argus on Sunday features the plight of medical students who the papers say are willing to pay up to 100,000 rand for internships at preferred hospitals across the country. It seems that some kind of horse trading has been taking place between the students on Facebook and messaging apps such as Telegram, where students offer financial incentives to swap hospital posts with each other. Western Cape, Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal apparently are the most desired internship locations. The Sunday World is leading with a story about how Absa Bank wants former Bosasa boss and his wife to repay the 10 million rand loan that they obtained from the bank 5 years ago. All right, so those are your Sunday newspapers, but a lot of you, particularly those under 30, get a lot of their news via social media. So let's see what's grabbed your attention on Twitter today. So we began on social media, and so this is South Africa, and I've got to tell you, it's the usual suspects most of the times. Sunday Twitter, Sacred Space, Sunday Feels, all the usual stories, and then UFC at number 2 is also another regular when there is that cage fighting. But there's also 1 and 3, fascinating, 2 women apparently fighting over a hubley. I can't believe it, but there you have it. But let's take a look at number 4, because I think I quite like the energy with it, number 4. And it's just people sending in nice messages. Have a blessed Sunday, everyone. The best investment you can make in your life is to pray for 5 minutes every Sunday or Sabbath. Those looking for a breakthrough in life, may God hear your prayers. Yeah, more messages. This one is quite naughty, actually, I think. Son Heung-min has now scored as many goals as Arsenal in the Premier League this season. Sunday Feels. So some people just tag on to these vibes. And this one, someone take a shot of the morning sun and said, look at the sun, how it shines for you. Sunday Morning Feels. And another message, be patient. Sometimes you have to go through the worst to get the best. Give some time. Be patient with yourself. Sunday Feels. And this one, Sunday feels like the whole week will be cold. So there you have it. Nice Sunday feeling that we get from people there. Thanks so much indeed for sharing your thoughts on social media. Now, this past week, the South African Broadcasting Corporation released its financial results for the year ended March 2020, and the projections paint a pretty bleak picture of the organization's financials. No doubt it was yet another difficult year for the corporation. The board chairperson, Bongamusa Makhathini, pointed to Centec transmission fees and salaries being the biggest costs being carried and those impacting on the corporation's financial positions. Well, the SABC has said that it would have to reduce its staff complement if it wanted to remain sustainable, and this has seen a retrenchment process being initiated. Predictably, this has been met by wide resistance with a public service mandate, and yet also operating with commercial interests. Questions are being raised about the best way to keep the SABC afloat. There are different funding models across the world for the public broadcasting, but what might be the one that best suits the South African public broadcaster? Well, to help us explore this, we're now joined by Peter Ndoro, who's the Deputy Chairperson of the SOS Coalition, which is a member-based public broadcasting network that campaigns for democratic media and broadcasting, as well as excellent programming by the public broadcaster to serve the public interest. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning to the listeners at home.
All right, so your thoughts about the difficulties that the SABC finds itself in at the moment. On the one hand, you've got management that has got a small pocket that it has to manage, and then on the other, you've got staff that have got expectations of job security and keeping their jobs. And it looks as if the two can't swim in the same boat. What are your thoughts about what's played out, especially with the backdrop of the public needing a public broadcaster that functions?
Yeah, I mean, Peter, it's unfortunate that the SABC find itself here, and it's been long coming. And you know, many civil society organizations, including including SOS Coalition itself, have been calling for the government to increase the funding of the SABC, and particularly, you know, speaking to Parliament to ensure that the funding model of the SABC, when we consider the question of government funding, that the government is able to do that. You know, considering the fact that, you know, ANC as a governing party took a resolution, I think in Mangaung, indicating that, you know, they're going to dedicate funding to the SABC. So my sense is that this has been long coming. However, we need to be sober-minded when we engage in this. And of course, that is difficult, considering the fact that we've undergoing the pandemic and people have lost their jobs. So it becomes a difficult point to consider, particularly if you were to say that all parties that are concerned need to be in the same room and try and come up with the best solution, because people are scared, as they should be. So my sense is that when it comes to the funding of the SABC, government has to really ensure that it does what has to be done, because this is a resolution that the ANC has passed a long time ago, but they have failed to ensure that that is carried through. So yeah, that is my sense.
All right, so let's talk about funding models. I mean, what makes sense? I look at the United Kingdom, for example. One of the things there is that they do not have advertising at all on their platforms. That's left to private media, and that the BBC relies entirely on license fees and also a stipend from government. Is that something we need to consider, do you think?
I think when it comes to the question of license fees, I mean, we've seen that it has been difficult for the SABC to collect, but also it seems that the public is not interested in paying for that, in as much as, there's an obligation. One might say that, we need to fund the public. The SABC is a public institution, and one point that needs to be emphasized is that the SABC belongs to the public, and we need to then have the responsibility of ensuring that it's funded. And one of the ways of we can achieve that is via the license fees. What as a coalition we've called for a mixed model where we, for an example, one of the areas we consider is that the license fees, but also advertising and ensuring that there's government funding as well as sponsorships, because we need to also take into consideration that the market is quite competitive. So which is why it's not entirely sustainable to forget or to not take into account the question of advertising, and also considering the fact that there are millions of South Africans who watch SABC, and it's possible for companies that want to advertise with SABC to take really to exploit that, right? So what we call for as a coalition is a mixed model that considers all this as possibilities, so that if, for an example, if we look at the fact that many people do not pay their TV licenses, if we were to solely rely on that, it would be a disaster, which is why it makes more sense to explore different methods. But I suppose, one thing that must be prioritized in all of this is the role of government, so yeah.
All right, so one question I've always asked and pondered on is, the moment you have commercial interests in your programming, it influences the type of programming that you do, whereas the public broadcaster really should be concentrating on the product, irrespective of how much money it can make.
Unfortunately, Peter, considering the unwillingness of government, it is really difficult. Ideally, I personally hold that view, right? That, we've seen how commercial interests can influence content, but also the direction of the institution, and then subsequently failing to carry out its public mandate. However, I think, if government was to step up, that issue wouldn't be something that we have to grapple with. But if we look at the history of the SABC, we then have to come to a conclusion that we have to explore different alternatives or different models. And at the same time, I think it is very much possible for the SABC to stick to its public mandate while being able to use advertising as one of the sources of revenue. And of course, media studies teaches us that they're just like media houses or institutions such as the SABC. Not the SABC itself, but the institution like itself can easily be influenced because of commercial interests. We know this, just in terms of the function of media in society. However, I don't think that should be an entirely a concern. Sorry, my cat is not being naughty.
Wants to be a TV star.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it is a concern. At this point, if we look at how things stand, if we were to do a cost-benefit analysis, I suppose it appears to be the least of the concerns. Yeah.
So, I'm going to use an example like astronomy. We cannot inspire the next generation of astrophysicists, astronomers, if there isn't a program that inspires young people on television. And the likelihood of a program on astronomy happening is quite small because we have no money and we almost have to look for programs that can be paid for by sponsorship or whatever. And nobody will jump in there, but it is an important public service to inspire young people. Isn't that something that should motivate government to say, we will pay for this? We will pay for the public events that you have to do.
Look, I mean, Peter, it's very sad, that things are here, like I said, because it is. I mean, there's benefits to having the public broadcaster operating and in a very sustainable manner. Whether it's in terms of information dissemination, we even saw now during COVID, just in terms of like health messaging, how people were able to get necessary information insofar as being able to avoid getting COVID, right? So besides, I mean, in addition to what you were saying, there are many benefits, but also understanding that the constitution of this country does really note the value of media in society. So I think government needs to step up. There's no other question. At the same time, we must be honest that considering where the SABC comes from, particularly with the role of Claudio Mutsoening, where we are now, hence I invoke this idea of being sober-minded. There are difficult decisions that are going to have to be made in terms of ensuring that the institution is turned around. I mean, so let me make an example. When we look at the Zondo Commission, we watch eagerly and we hear all sorts of, just unethical practices, right, at different institutions. However, when we look at that, one can come to a conclusion that surely people have to be held accountable. The institutions have to be turned around. So if we take that and we look at the Zondo Commission and thinking in that manner, the same can be applied to the SABC, that considering the mismanagement of state institutions in the past years, the unfortunate consequences would be that people are going to lose jobs. Even the question of the SABC itself and this idea of independence and considering advertising and commercial interests, those are some of the consequences of the past management of the institution. So the unfortunate thing is that we find ourselves here. But I think the overarching point at the end of this interview is that we need to push government to carry out its obligations insofar as ensuring that the SABC is sustainable.
All right. My last argument for public funding from the purse, when it comes to police, it's a public service. When we come to public hospitals, it's a public service. All of these are not profit centers. Why isn't the SABC treated in exactly the same way? It's as important.
It shocks me because if we look at the SABC, right, we look at number of people who rely on it, but also it's not just about the fact that we have South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. Therefore, people do not have other alternatives, even if they desired to, for example, access content using other mediums other than the SABC. But there are obligations, that the Constitution sets out, that we have freedom to access information, right? We have that as citizens, and that's what it means to live in a democratic society. So I think, we're going to have to really, as citizens, but also as civil society, push the state to take accountability, because it has not. At the same time, I think as citizens, we also have to be honest in terms of wanting to change the institution. We always complain about, corruption, about, the mess that exists in public institutions. Yet we are not willing to even do something as mundane as paying a TV license.
Right,
And
right.
I'm not saying that people don't have other issues that where they want their money to go to, because, as I've noted, we are struggling financially and otherwise. However, we need to take ownership of the institution. Yeah.
Okay, so government has to step up and the public have to step up as well to make sure that the public broadcaster continues to do its work. But we in turn must also manage in the best way that we can. Thanks so much indeed, my dear brother, for sharing your thoughts with us today. And let's hope that those in power are listening and that they bear us in mind. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back we'll have lots more for you. And in fact, a little bit later on in the program, I'm going to introduce you to a young man at 26 became the editor of the Cape Times, and he's just been recognized a few weeks ago as one of the top media players under 30 in the world. That's all coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, every week we try and catch you up with what's happening with journalists across the continent. It's quite a battle in many countries, sadly, to do the work of journalism. And for us, it's important that we make sure that their stories are told. And we begin now with the journalist Yao Alex Halan, who's a reporter with the privately owned PDC I-24 TV broadcaster, who was arrested on the 3rd of November by police officers along with at least 20 other people at the home of opposition leader and former President Henri Konan Bédié in Abidjan, and that's in Ivory Coast. Yao is reported to have been held by authorities until November the 10th. Meanwhile, Stéphane Betty, a reporter with the privately owned Cameroon-based Agence de Presse Panafricaine, says a news agency was arrested by plainclothes police officers on the 9th of November whilst he was reporting on demonstrations. The men beat him and then delivered him to a local police station where he was interrogated and held for several hours. He said that protests have taken place in Ivory Coast since the country held elections on October the 31st, which have been disputed by coalition opposition parties. At least 6 journalists are currently being detained in Ethiopia without being known what they are officially charged with, and that's according to Reporters Without Borders. Among the arrested is Bekalu Alamru, who's a political reporter for the YouTube channel Aulo Media, who's reputedly very critical of Ethiopia's current government and a supporter of the opposition Tigray People's Liberation Front, now in open conflict with the federal government to the north of the country. Medihan Ebu Park Michael is the editor-in-chief of the Addis Standard, one of the main English-language weeklies, is also very critical of the current government. Medihan was released after being arrested on the 7th of November, but was re-arrested on the 10th of November. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission says that other 4 journalists were arrested on the night of 10 November. They are Haftu Gebreziabe, Tsegaye Hadush and Abraha Hagos of the Ethiopian Press Agency, and Udi Musa, a journalist with the Oromia Media Network, a television channel that was banned under the previous government and whose founder has been jailed for the past several months. All right, so not great news, sadly, about what's happening across the continent. But as I said, we will continue to feature these stories because it should not be a crime to be a journalist. Right, every week we also like to take you back to news as it was reported back in history. And we take you into our news archives and we take you back to the 25th of November 2004. I mean, that's a long time ago, but the remnants of this case are still reverberating now. And that was Schabir Shasik court trial when the state's 3rd overseas witness, John Lennon, a professor of travel and tourism at Glasgow University, took the stand in the fraud and corruption case. And this is how the SABC, as Mukokeli Tanda, covered the story.
The state's 3rd overseas witness, John Lennon, professor of travel and tourism at Glasgow University, has taken the stand in the Schabir Shasik fraud and corruption trial. It relates to a proposal to set up an ecotourism school in KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. He was to give his evidence via video link, but Judge Hilary Squires turned down the state's application.
From the airport straight into the witness box, Lennon told the court how Shasik used his influence with Jacob Zuma, then KwaZulu-Natal's MEC for Economic Affairs and Tourism, to stop the project. The professor said he met Zuma in Durban in 1998, telling him the school would train people and boost the economy. Lennon said the meeting with Zuma was to obtain a letter of support for the development of an ecotourism school in KwaZulu-Natal. He said the letter of support was needed to obtain a grant from the British Council. The letter was just one produced in court today. It came several months later from Shasik's Nkobi office, signed by Zuma, saying that Nkobi should be the BEE partner for the project. Lennon wrote back saying he already had local partners and the project was still in the planning stage. Lennon said this was unusual and irregular, and it suggested a degree of influence over Zuma. Shasik's Nkobi office responded saying Shasik felt insulted and marginalized. The letter also gave Lennon a 3-day deadline, otherwise Shasik would go back to Zuma. Lennon said the project failed. The defense insisted Shasik never stopped the project and that he'd never met Lennon. The tension inside the courtroom outside.
Guys, what is this?
Sir, can we talk about this here? Okay? This is an everyday thing. And no, I need a legal person to talk to because this is really harassment. You're harassing us.
And Shasik's entourage once again showed their irritation with the paparazzi.
Now stop it now. Okay.
Renee Horn, SABC, Durban.
All right, that was 16 years ago. Schabir Shasik did go to jail and was eventually released on medical parole. And that, of course, was linked to former President Jacob Zuma. And I think his half of those charges are only going to be ventilated in the very near future. All right, let's catch you up with what's going to be happening in a half an hour's time. The program, the agenda is going to be on your screens. And to tell us what's happening there is Blaine Herman. Blaine, a very good morning to you. What can we expect on the program later?
Hey, Peter. Good to see you. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, coming up on the program, we've got 4 hours together today. We'll tell you more about the Group of 20 or the G20 Leaders Summit, the premier forum for international economic cooperation. President Cyril Ramaphosa, as you know, leads South Africa's delegation to the virtual summit. So today, the president participates in the session on building an inclusive, sustainable and resilient future. So stand by for that. We'll get you very latest on that story. We'll also take you to KwaZulu-Natal, where the Umshwati bulk water supply scheme will be handed over today with the aim of bringing relief to water-stressed areas in KwaZulu-Natal. Our reporter Mlondi Khadebe is live for us there. Plus, we also have a packed sports bulletin for you. We are reflecting the big results from the sporting world, and we also have two feature packages, very interesting indeed, where Proteas fast bowler Khakiso Rabada will be speaking to Sadhguru about the Black Lives Matter movement. And secondly, Kylie, a 52-year-old lady from Brackley, talks about being a Formula One marshal at Silverstone. So all those stories and much, much more coming up between 10 and 2. Peter?
Thanks so much, Blaine. Sounds like a packed 4 hours. We'll certainly be watching. Okay, so that's Blaine Herman, your anchor for the program The Agenda, coming to you in about 29 minutes' time. So please stay tuned for that. After the break, we'll have more for you right here on the program Media Monitor. We'll have the international editor, local editor, and we go to Uganda. A lot's been happening there. We'll get a sense of what's happening on the ground there. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, the International News Media Association, INMA, is the global body that provides global best practice for news media companies. Now, a few weeks ago, it unveiled its list of 30 young professionals judged to be rising stars in the global news media industry for 2020. This with the idea that the news media industry craves the infusion of young professionals into its ranks who can rejuvenate workplace cultures, helping to, I suppose, reimagine new brands in a complex and evolving digital environment. Well, great news. Siyavuya Mzansi, editor of the Cape Towns, is one of the winners of the 2020 Under 30 Awards, as well as one of the 6 Global Grand Prize winners. He's recognized for being one of 30 rising stars in new media with early career achievements, insights into innovation, with an ability to influence and show a range of management skills across a number of functions. Incredibly, Sia's appointment to the editor, to be editor at the age of 26 also makes him the youngest editor in independent news media group and possibly across the continent. Well, Sia joins us now to tell us his story. Sia, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to your viewers at home. Thank you for having me.
So congratulations on this global recognition as, you know, the rising stars in the media across the world. And I know that you're the grand prize winner, particularly for the continent. How did that make you feel, being recognized in this way?
That is correct, Peter. I mean, it's one thing being recognized in general, and it's one thing being recognized regionally. And I mean, it takes it to another level when you're being recognized among your peers globally. It's unbelievable. I couldn't believe, because look, you are ranked among people who have all the tools of the trade that allow them to do the impossible. And here I was, here in the little corner of our South Africa, being ranked amongst these people. So it's a great achievement, but I think, Peter, it speaks to not only to what we are capable of. It speaks to what we are and what we can achieve given the right platforms. And I think that's what has happened since my appointment just a year ago. So I think it speaks to the opportunities that we have been afforded, and given the right platforms to showcase what you are capable of. So, I mean, you know, I felt very honored, honestly, Peter, more than anything else. You know, you feel our achievement and its everyday achievement is to report on what the most or the poor of the poorest go through. But when you recognize globally, I mean, it takes it to another level.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about the stories that you write and edit. But the Cape Times, I mean, this is a paper with a centuries-old history. First black editor at 26. Tell us about that journey and taking the responsibility of an iconic newspaper such as the Cape Times.
It was, Peter, when I was appointed to the role of the editor at the Cape Times, it was quite a sobering a thing for me personally, because I mean, it's taken 143 years of the paper to actually get a black editor, which is a great injustice to the majority of this country. You ask, why has not this been done over the 143 years? But it speaks to the issue that we as South Africa face, in that, you know, we often speak about what transformation is, but we never really live the true meaning of what transformation is. But we're not saying appoint people or put people in places because, you know, you want to address or sugarcoat transformation. It should be a lived experience. It should be people who are able to do things and who are competent enough to be in this position. So I think it was quite a sad thing that it happened. But of course, we're given a responsibility to try and address. We can't undo what has happened, but we can only try to address that injustice. And one of my things when I took over, Peter, was to say, how do we try to make this publication under very difficult circumstances? How do we try to make it accessible to people in Khayelitsha? How do we make it accessible to the kid in Manenberg? How do we entrench it to be a culture in families in most disadvantaged communities? So it's a difficult task that we carry every day, and I'm proud of the people that I work with, Peter. Of course, you know, most of us are at the same age, and I'm very proud of that. And mostly, our newsroom is dominated by women. So I'm proud to have people who come from these communities, because it speaks to what we are trying to achieve. Of course, we're not trying to exclude anyone. That would be double injustice. We're trying to address a legacy that excluded the majority of this country. So it's a huge responsibility we carry in our shoulders. But it's a task that has to be taken, and unfortunately, I'm that person who has to take it.
Yeah. So the International News Media Association, INMA, when they looked at these 30 young people around the globe under 30, at the back of their mind, what they were looking for were people that are really editors of the future and media practitioners of the future. Have you started to re-engineer the way we do media in South Africa at the Cape Times? In other words, you know, are you new school just because you're young as well?
Look, Peter, it's an everyday process. I don't think it's something that can be addressed overnight or in a couple of weeks. Remember, when you compare us with the rest of the world, we are lagging a bit behind because of the historical injustice, and we are more, you know, traditional media orientated. By that I mean mostly print still relatively dominates, you know, the older population. But the things we're trying to do, I think we've positioned ourselves in a very good way, in that we have young people, young vibrant people, and I'm glad that one of our reporters recently won a Vodacom of the Year award, and that speaks to what we are capable of, Peter, and are able to do. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a process that we have started, and I am sure in a couple of years, or a year or two, the results will speak for themselves. They're already speaking for themselves. But I think, Peter, the foundation was already there. With my predecessor, Anis Sali. He laid the foundation, project that he started when he took over, and we've been working through it up till now. So it's just a continuation of a foundation that has already been laid, a solid foundation, by the way, that we've laid. Hence, we are seeing the results that we are seeing. Peter, the people we work with, the capabilities that they are able to produce, it's beyond imaginable.
All right. So what kind of journalist are you molding, that are you trying to shape, that they can deliver on this vision of yours? I suppose it's more than just writing. It's going to be multimedia. It's going to be different thinking, I guess.
Luckily, Peter, we no longer have like general reporters, and it cuts across the group. We have multimedia journalists, people who are able to produce for online and produce video and produce sometimes images. But what we're trying to mold here, Peter, is people that are conscious of our society, people who are able to integrate to these communities that we are trying to bring, around the table. People who are able to tell those kind of stories of a gogo who walks a couple of kilometers to get a grant. And I'm quite pleased that we are proud, Peter, to say we always take the side of the poor, and we're not ashamed of that. We cannot be silent when the poor suffer. So those are the journalists that we're trying to mold. People who are conscious about our society, people who are able to produce across multiple platforms, and people who are in general sympathetic to the cause of poor South Africans.
Sia, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but congratulations on your recognition by the International News Media Association as one of the stars, rising stars in the media globally. And congratulations on taking over the helm of such an historic newspaper at such a young age, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Peter, and have a lovely day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, so there you have it. Sia Mzansi has been recognized by the International News Media Association as one of the most influential rising stars in the media under 30 in the world. And at just 26 became the editor of the Cape Times, the first black person to edit that paper in 143 years. Incredible achievement, and certainly I think somebody that we need to keep an eye on. Likely going to do amazing things going forward. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're hoping to go to Uganda, and you'll know that in recent weeks the authorities there have been clamping down on opposition figures. One in particular, Bobi Wine, who's a pop star turned presidential candidate, hugely popular, and it seems that the president is accused of being heavy-handed with him, and we'll chat to a journalist in the country about the situation on the ground ahead of elections in the country. Stay with us, you're watching Media Monitor. Welcome back, you're watching Media Monitor. Every week we try and go to another country on the continent and get a sense of what's happening on the ground from what we call a guest editor. And our international guest editor today, we head to Kampala in Uganda, where the former editor of Uganda's Observer newspaper and is a multimedia journalist, Benon Herbert Oluka, joins us now to take us through some of the biggest stories in the East African country. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter. Glad to be here.
All right. So I guess in the end, probably the biggest story are the elections and what's happening in the lead up to these elections, particularly around opposition figures such as Bobi Wine.
Yes, that's the story of the moment in Uganda. We have 11 candidates, but really the front runners are President Museveni, who is the incumbent, and Bobi Wine, who is so he leads the National Unity Platform Party, which has really surged forward and become a force within the country. But we also have the Forum for Democratic Change, which is a party that fielded the closest challenger to President Museveni in the last 4 elections. That is Kizza Besigye. This time round, it's led by the party president, Patrick Amuriat Oboy.
All right, so there was a long-time rival, Kizza Besigye. I haven't heard much from him. Is he running or is he stepping back this time around?
Kizza Besigye stepped back this time around. He's mentioned a number of times in the past that having contested 4 times against President Museveni, he does not think it's viable to win an election against Museveni, who controls all arms of government. He controls the election. He's mentioned that he's a player as well as a referee in the game. So he does not think by conventional means, that is the election, he can get rid of President Museveni. So he has what he's calling a plan B, which is mobilizing citizens and creating awareness about the grip on power that the incumbent has. And he hopes that that's the avenue he can use to, change the government.
All right. I know that you've got a couple of papers there with you. Let's start with the Sunday Vision. What's on the front page there?
So the Sunday Vision has a story about government fixing salaries in private schools as its main story. As you can see, the Sunday Vision is a government-owned newspaper, so as you can see, for some reason conspicuously absent is the story about what happened through the week. The biggest story of the week is not there. They talk about President Museveni commissioning a hotel in Moroto, which is in the northeastern part of the country, and then the opposition leaders agreeing on a joint strategy. But like I said,
the main story missing.
The New Vision is the leading newspaper in the country, the leading newspaper in the country by circulation, and somehow it does not have the biggest story of the week.
All right, it does happen in other parts of the continent. The Sunday Monitor, what's on the front page there?
Yeah, the Sunday Monitor has stories of the killed. That is, so there were 46 people killed during the protests that were sparked off by the arrest of Bobi Wine or Robert Chagulanyi, the presidential candidate. He was arrested in the eastern part of Uganda on Wednesday for allegedly contravening COVID-19 guidelines. So the government has put in place guidelines to ensure or to prevent further spread of this pandemic during the campaigns. The guidelines say candidates cannot have more than 200 people at a meeting that they hold to campaign. So they are supposed to campaign by hosting their leaders in those respective communities, who then go and propagate their message to the population. But Bobi Wine has been a magnet of support. Wherever he goes, lots of people gather, and he addresses them. So the government said he contravened COVID-19 prevention guidelines and arrested him on Wednesday, and that sparked off huge protests around the country that led to the death of 46 people, many of them shooting by the police. So the Monitor has a story telling the stories of the victims of those shootings.
All right.
That is the lead story, and then they talk about the
Okay.
Forum
Herbert,
for Democratic Change candidates.
unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much indeed for giving us a flavor of what's happening in Uganda. Asante sana, Sebo Oluka.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, Benon Herbert Oluka, who's the Africa editor at Global Investigative Journalism Network, speaking to us from Uganda. And yeah, sadly, you're seeing opposition figures being jailed for holding rallies during COVID-19. But at the same time, the president, Yoweri Museveni, is having election rallies, and the police don't seem to be bothering him or arresting him for having elections rallies during COVID-19. So double standards, and the opposition, of course, crying foul, saying that this is not a level playing field. All right, let's, in fact, we're trying to connect you with somebody to talk to us a little bit about what's in the Sunday newspapers. And there are a number of headlines which I think are probably going to grab people's attention. If we can put up the City Press, I think this one for me is the one that really speaks quite loud. And the key witness in the case against the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, his personal assistant when he was still the Premier, says that she's not said that she wants to be a witness in this case. Well, it'll be interesting if, in fact, let's join our guest now, who's going to help us take us through this, and that's Themba Sipopatekele. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the viewers again.
All right, we don't have much time, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Which paper grabbed your attention, and what does it say?
Firstly, the story that you just alluded to on City Press, page 1 story, has serious ramifications, actually, and many questions that needs to be asked and to be answered as to whether the witness decided voluntarily not to testify again, or that she was intimidated or threatened, or whether she was promised something. So we don't know. We need to get into the bottom of that. And I think the media should help us in ensuring that we get to the bottom of that story. That's what a story that quite caught my attention about.
All right. I mean, she'll have to be subpoenaed if she doesn't want to do it willingly. And I'm sure that some testimony or questions have already been answered. But all right. And then another paper very quickly.
The Sunday Times story actually on ex-ministers who are high flyers, living large, spending about 8 million rands on flying together with the apartheid politicians is one story that also I think the newspapers should focus on and give us more meat on that. Who are they? Why are they still benefiting despite that that kind of law has been cancelled or repealed in the Minister Handbook?
All right, Themba, short and sweet. Thank you very, very much indeed for giving us your thoughts on those two big stories. Thanks, my brother.
Thanks.
All right, so you're going to have to take a look at those papers yourself. Yeah, lots of stories in there. Front pages we'll go through. We've gone through them there. That's how we come to the end of Media Monitor. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and join us again next week. In the meantime, COVID is real, so please follow those protocols and protect each other. Stand by for the agenda coming up in 4 minutes. Bye-bye.